Parents disowned me after brother's lies. A decade later, his wife reveals the truth, so I turned his perfect life upside down. I stood on the hill overlooking the house where my brother lived his seemingly perfect life. The lights twinkled warmly, a vision of domestic bliss. It was the same house where he had thrown me under the bus a decade ago. My parents, their trust shattered in me, had cut me out of their lives like I was an infection. Now, the truth was out, and I had a plan. But let me start from the beginning. Claire, is this true? My mother's voice trembled as she held out the crumpled sheet of paper. I stared at it, unable to believe what I was seeing. It was a receipt for a $12,000 withdrawal from their joint account. The signature at the bottom looked like mine, but it wasn't. No, Mom, of course not. I don't even know about this. Across the room, my brother Ryan leaned against the doorway, his arms crossed. You expect us to believe that? His tone was smooth, confident, like he'd practiced the line. Ryan, you know I didn't do this. He shook his head. Stop lying, Claire. You've been in debt for months and Dad warned you. Now, suddenly, $12,000 goes missing and it's your signature. Come on. My father's face hardened. We trusted you, Claire. I trusted you. The tears welled up before I could stop them. I didn't. Enough! My father slammed his fist on the table. I don't want to hear another word. He turned to my mother. She's not staying here another night. Pack your things and leave, Claire. You're not welcome in this house. I looked to Ryan, desperate. He didn't even flinch. That night, I packed my belongings into 2 garbage bags and left the only home I'd ever known. My parents didn't even look at me as I walked out the door. Ryan's face drained of color as my words hung in the air. My parents sat in stunned silence, staring at the damning evidence spread out on the table. The room was heavy with tension, the kind that presses on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Ryan stammered, his voice barely audible. I turned to him, my glare sharp enough to cut glass. Didn't mean for it to go this far. You framed me, Ryan. You stole from our parents and let me take the fall. You watched as they kicked me out of this house without so much as a second thought, but sure, tell me how you didn't mean for it to go this far. Claire. My mother's voice wavered. We didn't know. If we had... I cut her off. If you had? You chose not to believe me. You took his word over mine without even giving me a chance to defend myself. My voice cracked with anger, but I refused to let the tears fall. My father finally spoke, his voice low and gravelly. Ryan, look at me. Ryan lifted his head, his eyes darting between the 3 of us like a trapped animal. Did you do this? Dad's words were deliberate, each one heavy with suppressed rage. Did you steal from us and blame your sister? Ryan swallowed hard. Dad, Answer me. My father's fist slammed onto the table, making the dishes clatter. Yes, Ryan blurted out, his voice breaking. Okay, yes, I did it, but I was desperate. I had no choice. No choice? I snapped. You had a choice, Ryan. You could have come clean. You could have taken responsibility, but instead you chose to destroy my life. I thought they'd forgive you eventually, he said weakly, avoiding my gaze. I didn't think... You didn't think at all. My voice rose, shaking with the force of my fury. Do you have any idea what I went through? The jobs I had to take just to survive? The nights I cried myself to sleep because I thought my own family hated me? Claire, stop, my mother cried, her face streaked with tears. Stop. Why should I stop? Because it's uncomfortable for you? Because it hurts to realize you abandoned your daughter for a liar and a thief? Claire... My mother's voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. My father sat back in his chair, his expression one of pure devastation. How could you, Ryan? He whispered. How could you do this to your sister? To us? Ryan's shoulders sagged, and for the first time I saw genuine fear in his eyes. I'm sorry, he muttered, barely audible. "You don't get to be sorry," I said coldly. "Not after everything you've done." There was a long silence before my father spoke again. "Get out!" Ryan's head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me." My father's voice was firm, unyielding. "Pack your things and get out of this house. You're no longer welcome here." "Dad, wait. You lied to us. You stole from us. And you destroyed your sister's life in the process." His voice cracked, but his resolve didn't waver. "You're no son of mine." Ryan turned to my mother, desperation etched across his face. "Mom? Please, don't let him do this." But my mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't look at you right now, Ryan. I can't." For a moment, Ryan looked like he might argue, but then he slumped in defeat, his face a mask of shame. Without another word, he pushed back his chair and walked out of the room. The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't know what to say, or if there was anything left to say. "Claire." My mother's voice was barely a whisper. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "No," I said firmly. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to cry and apologize and pretend like this makes everything okay." My father looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. "We were wrong, Claire, so wrong. I don't expect you to forgive us, but—" "You're right," I interrupted. "I can't forgive you. Not yet." My mother flinched as if I'd slapped her. "But we're your parents. We love you." "Love?" I laughed bitterly. "You call that love? You threw me away like I was nothing. And for what? Because it was easier to believe Ryan than to stand by your own daughter?" Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I was standing up for myself. "I'm not here to fix this family," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here because I deserve the truth, and now that I have it, I'm leaving." "Claire, wait," my father pleaded, but I was already walking toward the door. "Goodbye, Mom, Dad." As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, and I took a deep, shuddering breath. For the first time in a decade, I felt free. Ryan's perfect life was in ruins. My parents were left to grapple with their guilt. And me? I was finally ready to start over, this time on my own terms. For years, I scraped by. I worked 3 jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, while Ryan thrived. He married his college sweetheart, Emily, bought a house, and became the golden child, basking in the love and admiration of the family I'd lost. I stopped trying to contact my parents after the 5th unanswered letter. It was clear. They believed Ryan's lies. A decade later, fate intervened. I was working as an event coordinator at a swanky hotel when Emily appeared in the lobby. She was thinner than I remembered, her face pale and drawn. "Claire?" I froze. "Emily?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I need to talk to you, please." Reluctantly, I led her to a quiet corner. She gripped her purse tightly, her hands trembling. "I don't even know how to say this," she began, "but I need to tell you the truth about Ryan, about what he did to you." My heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" She took a deep breath. "It was Ryan who stole the money from your parents. He forged your signature. He was in trouble with some gambling debts and he panicked." I stared at her, unable to process the words. "He told me the truth years ago," she continued, tears streaming down her face. "But he made me promise not to say anything. I felt so guilty. I'm sorry, Claire. I should have come to you sooner." The rage boiled inside me, years of pain and betrayal bubbling to the surface, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Why now, Emily? Why are you telling me this now?" Her voice cracked. "Because I'm leaving him. He's not the man I thought he was. And I want to make things right." The pieces of a plan began to form in my mind. "If you really mean that," I said, my voice cold, "then you're going to help me." Emily and I worked in secret for weeks. She provided me with copies of Ryan's financial records, his emails, even a recording of him admitting to the forgery. Then came Thanksgiving. The dining room at my parents' house was as grand as I remembered, the table set with fine china and crystal glasses. Ryan sat at the head, laughing with my parents as if he hadn't destroyed my life. When I walked through the door, the room fell silent. "Claire?" My mother's voice was a whisper. "Hello, Mom." "Dad." I stepped forward, holding a folder in my hands. "I think it's time we had a little family discussion." Ryan stood, his face pale. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Sit down, Ryan," I said, my voice steady. "You'll want to hear this." I opened the folder and laid out the evidence on the table. The forged signature, the bank statements, the email Emily had intercepted where Ryan bragged about getting away with it. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father's face turned red with fury. "Ryan," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "Is this true?" Ryan stammered, his bravado crumbling. "Dad, I can explain." "Explain?" my father roared. "You framed your sister? You let us disown her? For what?" "I had no choice," Ryan shouted. "I was in trouble. Enough!" My mother's voice cut through the chaos. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Claire, I'm so sorry. We should have believed you. We should have—" "It's too late for apologies," I said coldly. "I didn't come here for forgiveness. I came to set the record straight."